Journal articles, the bread and butter of academic research, can be intimidating. If you aren't familiar with their terms, phrases, and organization, they can be challenging to read and understand. You might get discouraged or lost trying to sort through the barrage of information they contain and find what you're actually looking for. Welcome back to the channel. This is Holden from Classroom Camp. And in this video, I'm going to be introducing you to academic research and giving you just a few tips to help you get started on your search for journal articles. Now, this is a quick disclaimer. I am no expert in academic research. However, I do know a little bit, and I have to find and read through academic research on the regular, so I do know a little bit, and I'm going to share what I have learned with you to help you get started. Now, whether you are a teacher, a instructional leader, or just an enthusiast, just someone trying to read the news, this is going to be extremely helpful for you, as it has been for me, because I use journal articles to write academic papers, but I also use it as a teacher on the regular to find ideas and suggestions, evidence-based suggestions and practices that I can use in my classrooms. So we're going to take a look at some of that today, and I'm going to show you a real world example of how you can find useful information to use on your own. So let's take a look real quick at just this objective that I have written for this video. So it says here, when given a topic, you will be able to draw evidence-based conclusions about the topic by finding and reading a journal article. That's what I want you to be able to do by the end of this video. Now, our success criteria here is find a journal article on a topic, read a journal article, and draw evidence-based conclusions about our topic. So what I have open here obviously is a web browser. I'm using Brave. You may use Google Chrome. And I also have Zotero opened up because this is where I store and organize all of my research. I talked about Zotero a little bit in a previous video. I'll post a link to that down in the description. But Zotero is extremely useful for after you find articles or book excerpts, whatever, you can pop it all into Zotero and keep it all organized in one place. So let's begin by first finding a journal article on a topic. And this video is not scripted in any way, so I'm just going to be taking you through this with my process and kind of doing a lot of impromptu work here. But whenever I first begin to look for articles, I go to a website called ERIC, and I'm just going to search for ERIC Research. And the first result here is Education Resources Information Center. This is a great database for finding all types of journal articles, and I'll show you that. Now I'm going to search for, you can see here some of my search terms down here, and we'll just find, we'll look up school communication. The reason I look up school communication is because some schools are better at communicating expectations and just general plans to teachers than others. So that is a topic that I have researched in the past. But I just want to show you here on ERIC, when you search using this term, you can narrow down your search results. And I like to narrow mine down. Some of the things you can do is you can search for only articles in 2025. You can see here so that you don't get things that are too old, you know, like things beyond the last 20 years, even though some great articles have been published a long time ago. But one thing that I really like to do is I go to publication type and I click journal articles. Because a lot of times you'll get dissertations, and dissertations are a whole different thing. But we're going to be focusing on journal articles, so I click there. And let's just see what we find as far as a journal article. And I'm going to narrow down my search just a little bit. I'm going to put leadership. Let's see. Okay. All right, so I'm searching here and let's just look here. Behavior and learning, the development of staff efficacy in one school. And hopefully it has something to deal with leadership. But the reason that I singled out this article is because over here on the right-hand side, it says download full text. I automatically know that I can gain access to the text. That's something to consider, is that you can't always get access to everything in ERIC because some of these articles will be locked behind a paywall, or you have to be affiliated with an institution. But I'm going to just click on this article here. And here's what we have. Now, as you can see up here, this article is 20 pages. This is a long article. And that is the most intimidating factor when it comes to journal research, because you get these long articles and you're like, where do I even start? Like, what do I do? Well, I'll tell you what you do. The first thing you want to do is read the abstract. And let's go ahead and read this abstract to see, because the abstract is basically a summary of the article and it's going to tell us exactly what's going on. And it might even let us know what's going to happen in the end of the article. Like, it will tell us some of the conclusions that were drawn. So it says, in this paper, we report a qualitative case study of how a primary school principal enhanced staff belief in their efficacy and practice in relation to children's behavior. Thematic analysis was used to analyze interviews with principal and teaching staff. We identified 4 main themes relating to their attributions, beliefs, and practices: attitudes and expectations, leadership, communication, and school ethos and practices. We conclude by considering how the principal's own beliefs and leadership practices were associated with changes in the beliefs and practice of the staff. So in my mind, I think this is exactly what I was looking for, at least some of it, because it does include communication and how that affects the teaching staff. Some of these other terms that are in here, we see qualitative case study, we see thematic analysis, interviews. Again, that's a lot of jargon that if you're not familiar with types of research, you might get a little bit lost. But what I will tell you here is that qualitative means that as compared to quantitative relates to quantities, and normally it is related to numbers and the gathering of numbers, such as in surveys, but you are looking at numerical data. Qualitative is normally related to words and the meaning behind words. And as it says here, we have interviews. So this is an article that is about interviewing principals and teachers to find out what is actually going on and to find some meaning in that. So that's the abstract. Now, like I said, this is 20 pages long. How are we going to get through all this? Well, we're not going to get through all this. We're going to skip most of this, in fact. It can be useful to read the introduction because the introduction of a journal article is going to give us some context. It will kind of just give the overall premise of the article. Like, it will tell us why it is important and possibly why the researchers decided that this was a topic or phenomenon worth studying. But we're not even going to read that here. I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to skip down. And when I'm skipping down here, I'm not necessarily saying that this information is not useful. What I'm saying is that it might not be useful to you. It might not be what you are looking for at this moment, at least until you have a reason to. But as I told you in the beginning, let's actually go back to our success criteria. We're going to find a journal article about a topic, which we did. Now we're going to read the journal article. We're going to read some of it, and we're going to draw evidence-based conclusions about our topic. So we want to learn something about what we searched for, which, going back to Eric, we searched for school communication and leadership. So let's see what we can find about school communication and leadership. Now, the most important thing for us today is going to be discussion and conclusions. However, as I was scrolling and skimming down, I did see that there was a heading that was specific to communication. So we can go ahead and read through some of this just to see what it has to say about communication. And let's just kind of go through a little bit. It says, as we have already noted, the principal recognized the importance of communicating her vision and to both lead and transform practice. It was clearly important for the principal to be a visible presence around the school, actively engaging in discussion with the individual members of staff and children, and not relying only on formal meetings or messages. Now that's interesting. So that's what the principal believes, but let's see what the teachers actually think, because some people can be delusional. You know, you have a principal or leader that thinks that they do one thing, but they don't necessarily follow through. They have grand ideas about themselves, which might not necessarily be true. But it says here, in the group interviews, it was evident that teachers also recognized how they too enabled and supported each other by being open and talking about and reflecting on both problems and solutions to achieve inclusion and learning for all. We gained a sense that what teachers told us was the essence of a community of support and learning, as described by McMillan and Chavez. As one class teacher said, there is a lot of communication between teachers, and you will discuss with other teachers what actually works. You learn from other staff. So, this is very interesting. And what I can draw as a conclusion for myself from this is that by interviewing these teachers in this particular community, it seems as though we need a culture of communication and a sense of community in our school in order to have clear communication. You hear horror stories about toxic school environments where people are out to get each other, but it doesn't seem like that is necessarily the case here. So that is something that I learned, is that as teachers, if we want to have good communication, we also need to be good communicators ourselves and try to foster that culture of communication. So moving down here to discussion and conclusions, we'll just read a little bit of this. It says, we are certain that the evidence above indicates a considerable degree of triangulated congruence in the beliefs and expectations of all staff, principal included. Such a positive ethos is not, in our experience, found in all schools, just as I said. Many school staff in similar circumstances would be less likely to espouse such positive and inclusive beliefs in helping children to learn. Yada, yada, yada. Let's see if we can look specifically. Okay, communication. The findings suggest that the teachers' beliefs in their efficacy and inclusivity were shaped by the attitudes and expectation, communication, leadership, and the school's ethos shared across the school. We also found that the individual and collective beliefs in teachers' efficacy were linked via reflective practice and the collaborative ethos that the principal sought to encourage. The development of the teachers' inclusive practice was, they reported, associated with the shared preparation and planning and teaching methods they used. It also says down here, I'm kind of skimming through and I'm looking for key terms and I see communication. It says, in her present school, her leadership was instrumental in establishing an ethos in which attitudes and expectations were communicated, shared, and developed in teachers' classroom practice. This was manifest in deliberate choice of language, helping teachers to see that behavior was learned rather than managed, and in golden rules that made explicit the positive expectations of staff and pupils. And we can go on and on to read through this discussion because there are several pages here. This is about two pages, or 2.5, you might say, that is telling us that communication is crucial to teachers' self-efficacy, which basically that means teachers' confidence in themselves and belief that they can make a positive impact in the school or in their classrooms. And a lot of this it seems here in this article, it says, points to the fact that the principal was a leader that communicated expectations and sought to instill communication and have a positive effect on teachers. And as pointed out in this article, it's not always that case. It's not always that case in all schools. And another thing that I'm seeing here as I'm looking through this is that transformational leadership, which is a leadership style that seeks to transform and coach teachers in a way that empowers teachers, rather than being a dictator and saying, do this, do that. Asking teachers what their ideas and thoughts are, but then also making teachers and staff members question their own ideas. And it says, so in summary, this principal's beliefs in her self-efficacy and consequently her transformational and distributed leadership provided a foundation and expectation for enhanced practice and efficacy beliefs amongst the staff. The evidence we found was that this supported collectives' beliefs, expectations, and practices that enabled individual staff to grow in confidence in their own efficacy as inclusive teachers who can help children behave and learn. So this is great. And this is useful information. The type of information that I would like for my principal to see, or for my colleagues to see. And sometimes as a teacher, I read these articles. I find journal articles like this, and if they're interesting to me and I think they can be useful, I pass them along to my colleagues and just say, hey, you should read this. This says a lot. This has a positive spin. It says a lot. And these are things that we could potentially do to create a better culture and learning environment for our students. So what I would do if I like what I just skimmed through is I might go ahead and save this article, and I'm going to save this. I'm going to go and highlight the title. I'm going to save it and put that title in here. And if you probably already know that, yeah, okay, so it changed it for me. It changed it into a hyphen. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to open up Zotero. I'm going to open up my Finder. I'm going to go to my downloads and move this over. And I have this in Zotero. And look at this. Zotero, what I really like is it pre-fills in all the information for me. So it tells me this is a journal article, tells me the volume, issue, it does all that. Usually it does. And I'm going to tag this with Zotero, and I'm going to put a communication tag on it. And I'm also going to put an education leadership tag on it. So when I go back and want to find articles related to communication or education leadership, I can search for it in Zotero and go back and find it. And I can open this up just like I did. Basically, to go back and show you, I was back here. I just double clicked on that and opened up the article. And I might decide to scroll down to some of the points that we read and just highlight those, because I think those are important. And that's the main conclusion that I'm concerned with. So that is my introduction to journal articles and learning how to find information and recognize that it's not as difficult as you might imagine. In a 20-page article, we only read the abstract just to see if it was related to, if it told us anything about whether or not it would be useful for us. And then we went down to the conclusion and discussion down here at the very bottom. And most articles have that. We also looked at a little bit of the findings just to read, but we're kind of skipping around. So don't be intimidated by a journal article thinking that you just have to read the entire thing, because you definitely do not. You just are going to look for some specific things. And like I said, I would recommend the abstract, the discussion and conclusion, maybe some of the findings. And then if you want the context, the full context, go and read the introduction to find out where the researchers are coming from. But that's that. So we found a journal article on a topic. We read a journal article, and then we drew evidence-based conclusions about our topic. And those conclusions are that transformational leadership is great, communication is great, and leaders who have that leadership style and communicate expectations and empower their teachers will lead to a better, more healthy work environment that is conducive to student learning. So that's all I have for you in this video. Hey, and if you like this content, make sure that you hit that like button and consider subscribing to the Classroom Camp channel, because you don't want to miss out on all these great videos that I'll have coming out for you. Let me know what you thought of this video down in the comment section. And if you have additional tips or ideas that you would like to share, please put them there. For links to the resources I used in this video, I'll put those down in the description. Hey, I hope that you all enjoyed this. Like I said, that's all I have for you now, and I will see you in the next video.